What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you a video about Stolen Realm, a TRPG meets dungeon crawler with some ARPG loot mechanics that I would say definitely takes some healthy inspiration from the Divinity Original Sin series. First things first though, I do need to inform you that this video is in fact being sponsored by Burst to Flame Entertainment, the game's developer and publisher, which is a good time to mention that the game will be available today, March 8th, on PC, Xbox X and S, and Nintendo Switch. If you'd like to learn more, there will be a link down below where you can do just that. All of that said though, this is not the first time I've actually taken a look at Stolen Realm, as I had made a video on it all the way back in 2021 when it first launched into early access. So I thought it would be fun to jump in, check out what's improved, what's changed, and go over all of that with you at the same time. So as I mentioned, this game features tactical turn-based combat that we'll be engaging in, featuring a classless system reminiscent of the original Sin approach to combat, where we'll be running through procedurally generated areas, gathering up all sorts of loot in a system reminiscent of ARPGs. That said, you do have multiple ways to choose to play this game, starting with up to 6 heroes, which can all be controlled either solo by you or in cooperative play, both in a campaign or a roguelike mode, which differ significantly from each other. What's more though, and one of the things that makes this game unique, is its simultaneous turns. Now, both you and the enemy's entire teams will take all of their turns before it switches back. However, if you are in, say, multiplayer, every single one of your characters can take their turn at the same time. So there's no waiting around for someone to take their turn, as all of you can take your turn in the same go. And while you won't see that too much in single player, as you have to make all the moves, it is still the case for things like your summons, which aren't directly controlled by the character. So if you were to summon many different versions of undead minions or animals to help you, they will all take their turn simultaneously rather than waiting for your input. Another big important thing to know about this game is that the difficulty will scale with the number of characters. Now there's a set difficulty for both the campaign and the roguelike mode, but that is further scaled based on how many people are in the game. So you can play with a single character and the game will scale to that, but if you choose to run through the game with a higher player count, or higher character count I suppose you could say, the game will adjust and scale enemies to meet that challenge based on what you have available to you. And that, combined with the difficulty associated with the campaign and the roguelike modes, you should be able to find a happy medium to make the game as easy or as difficult as you would like it to be. From there, I want to break down both the campaign mode and the roguelike mode, as they vary pretty significantly. Kicking it off with campaign mode. Now, the first step is to, of course, create your party, be this 1 or 6 heroes, or anything in between. This is going to see you picking a build preset, which comes with set attributes and a set amount of skills from a bunch of different potential trees. Now, your 5 attributes, might, dexterity, vitality, intelligence, and reflex, are all very important in their own ways. For instance, might increases your damage done, intelligence increases your mana, vitality of course increases your health, and things like reflex affect your ability to dodge or mitigate damage outside of your armor, for instance. You can also customize the model here's appearance, which has a surprising amount of options given the graphical quality, alongside what weapon you'd like to start with, as well as whether or not you'd like to play a permadeath mode. But one of the most important decisions you'll make is actually that build preset we talked about, because that will determine your initial starting skills, though you can change them and customize this, which you'll get to pick 3 of from a total of 10 different skill trees. Both now and as you level up, you'll be able to mix and match these as you please, but of course acquiring the abilities at the bottom of these trees requires more of an investment, as they are locked off by your total number of points spent in the previous tiers. Now, as we play through the game, complete combat encounters and individual missions or runs through certain areas, we'll earn experience, which will, of course, cause us to level up. And progression in this game is largely down to both your level ups and thus what skills you acquire, alongside the loot progression. So the level ups are pretty straightforward. Every level you're going to get 5 attribute points to increase your attributes as you see fit, and you're going to get skill points to acquire new skills. And as I said, you can mix and match these. So in my initial campaign run here, I combined a Dark Knight, which was just heavily invested in the Shadow Tree, alongside a Shaman, who I then later picked up a few skills from nature so he could summon in animals on top of casting lightning abilities at people, creating a bit of a battle mage. as he could also swing a weapon at things, just as some basic ideas. But given how in-depth each tree is and the fact that you can mix and match them, just like the original Sin series, you can create quite a bit of diversified builds and lean into something that helps you out. Though I will say summoning is especially strong given the turn-based nature of the game, hinging upon an action economy. The loot side of things is also interesting as you play through the game, defeat enemies, find treasure encounters, etc. You'll be gathering up loot. Each comes with its own set of stats, and is leveled, of course. This is going to see you changing out loot pretty frequently, using the best things you can find that's going to alter your stats and affect your build. Itemization can also include things that grant you skills and abilities as well, to make things that much more interesting. And while a great deal of that loot is randomly generated through the missions and things you'll be taking on, you can alter it a fair bit via the crafting system. As you're exploring out in individual areas, you can find materials that you can then bring back to the vendors in the town areas to help craft and add specific affixes or prefixes to change exactly what equipment is doing for you and lean into, hopefully, your build a little bit better. Now, specific to the campaign, you'll be pulling up this world map via the portal in one of the towns. There are several different towns throughout this world map, and you'll be picking on one of these sub-areas, which will then load you into a procedurally generated area based on the region that will then see you traveling through, fighting various battles potentially, or simply dealing with encounters, such as finding treasure or events. Now, events are especially interesting because they can lead you to all sorts of things, be that battle, treasure, detrimental effects that last the rest of the quest you're on, or even potentially fortunes. These are substantial buffs that usually last for the run, but then once you found them can also be equipped into passive slots on each of your characters to then be a more permanent effect. And then lastly for the campaign, it does of course have a story that's told to you about your character's father and their descent into madness after they chased after some long-lost knowledge. All of which for the campaign can be done across a variety of difficulties, from casual to Heart of the Realm, which is the hardest. Most of what this affects seems to be enemy health and damage, as on casual, enemies will have very little health and deal extremely little damage, like usually in the ballpark of 1 to 2, whereas something like Adventurer ramps that up a little bit, with then even just Classic requiring more knowledge of, I would say, tactical games and how individual abilities function and what you can do to slow down your enemies, only to then keep advancing through Veteran, Torturous, and Heart of the Realm. That said, you can change the difficulty at any time, provided you're not on a mission, but otherwise you can change it pretty freely, and dying in campaign mode isn't that big of a deal unless you're on permadeath mode, otherwise you kind of just get sent back to town. Now that brings us to the roguelike mode before we start talking about actual combat, as it functions a bit differently. For starters, when you're picking a party, you do not create a character, but rather you pick up a preset. You're going to take that preset character and then play through the difficulties. So starting with difficulty 1, and then if you complete that, you'll unlock the next one alongside more presets to unlock, and participating in the roguelike mode grants you access to a specific currency that then lets you spend it on individual upgrades for your next run. These being things like increased damage, healing, attribute points, movement, resistances, basically just guaranteeing a better character to increase your odds of success the farther in you go as you conquer the difficulty modes. To make this even more interesting, however, after each combat encounter, as you level up, your skills will actually be randomized. You don't get to pick exactly what you want, but rather you'll be given a choice of a few and have to make a coherent build out of the things you are finding, which includes the loot, though realistically that didn't require as much changing given that it was already an ARPG system and thus randomized. You'll still get those randomized loot drops, but you'll only get to pick a single one after things that drop loot, and you'll have to attempt to organize a build out of the random options you're given in true roguelike fashion. So if you find campaign to be a little too slow, roguelike can be a much faster approach to the game, especially since if you die, you have to, of course, start again, picking another preset and jumping into it. And from there, let's finally talk about combat a little bit. So combat makes up, I would say, a gigantic portion of this game, as there will be many combat encounters to tackle, utilizing the team that you've built out, be it in campaign mode or the roguelike mode. Combat is a turn-based system that utilizes simultaneous turns, though you'll feel that the most for your team in co-op. On your turn, each character is going to have an action point and a movement range. They can move inside their movement range or move, attack, and then move, etc., however they want to spend it. And then you'll have an action point. Typically, this is going to let you cast or use one thing that costs an action, though not all abilities use an action. Rather, they simply rely on a cooldown, though typically your character will only have the one action to spend. As combat progresses, though, power-ups will be dropped onto the hex maps here, and sometimes you can use things like that to grant yourself another action for the turn and potentially use two abilities outside of something that doesn't just cost its cooldown instead. Both you and the enemy will take your entire team's turn each time in whatever order you so happen to choose, utilizing whatever effects and abilities you've combined to make your builds, which of course is going to affect how combat's going to play out a bit differently. And just to add a little more to that randomization, a lot of times combat will drop in environmental barrels that will have all sorts of effects on top of shrines and things like that that project an aura that will have both positive and detrimental effects on top of the power-ups dropping in and out as well. So exactly how any combat encounter can play out will be a bit different based on all of those varying factors. So it's a little bit of randomization on top of a fair bit of optimization and tuning on your part to create an effective build. Though obviously roguelike mode hinges a little more on the randomization side of things. But what I personally liked most about this system is simply that it is very easy to wrap your head around while still providing a ton of options, because within each of the trees they have a ton of different actual abilities and then regular old passive abilities that will then augment whatever you're doing, and mixing and matching those makes a ton of different options, such as mixing warrior with the fire tree, or healing with a necromancer, or the most recently added druid, for instance, can create all sorts of custom and unique characters, and that's just one member of your party, not to mention the other 5. So, as I'm sure you can see, there's plenty of ways to approach and enjoy this title. Though, again, if you want to learn even more, do feel free to check out the link in the description below. And this game is launching on Steam, of course, or PC, Xbox Series X and S, and Nintendo Switch. But that is pretty much going to do it for this video, so I certainly hope you enjoyed it and found it informative. If you did, don't forget to let me know how you feel about it down in the comment section below, which of course means to like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.